Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Atheist Experience. Tonight it's me and Jen Peeples.
How you doing?
Co-hosting. And I got announcements that were given to me by Matt and Russell, who helped me put them together, and I wanted to read an announcement intro that Matt actually wrote because I thought it was cute. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. It's Sunday, February 14th, and we're broadcasting live from Austin, Texas. I'm Tracie Harris. I'm joined by Jen Peeples, and we've kicked the boys off the show today just so we can mess with all the podcast listeners who can't tell the two of us apart. And just for the record, it's not just the podcast listeners, it's people even in person. This is a call-in program, and we'll have the number up on the stream shortly. If you're not watching the program live, you can tune in on Sundays from 4:30 to 6 p.m. and watch us on Time Warner and Grand Cable Channel 16, or watch the show over the internet from almost anywhere in the world via Ustream, which includes a chat room, and if it's working, the channel Austin Stream. For more information, visit the show's website at www.atheist-experience.com. Be sure to check out the fact page at the site that covers common questions we receive on the program. Also, at our website, you can access past episodes by clicking on the archive link, and you can see full episodes of the show at Blip TV, that's blip.tv, or you can subscribe to our audio podcast. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and separation of church and state. ACA has weekly meetings at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road every Sunday from 11:30 to 1, except for the first Sunday of each month, which is reserved for our lecture series that takes place at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe downtown. Lectures begin at 12:15 p.m. and the next lecture will be March 7th. For more information about ACA, visit the website at www.atheist-community.org. In addition to this program, ACA sponsors a bi-weekly audio podcast called Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. Yesterday's show should be available at the website www.nonprofitsradio.com. The show will be live again on February 27th. If you prefer sending an email rather than giving us a call, you can send comments or questions to tv@atheist-community.org. In addition to our media outreach programs, ACA also sponsors a number of social events, including an atheist happy hour on Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Dog and Duck Pub on 17th and Guadalupe. We also meet for dinner after the show at Threadgill's downtown location at 301 West Riverside around 6:30 p.m. That's right after the program. Be sure to check out the unofficial show blog at atheistexperience.blogspot.com, as well as the comprehensive counter-apologetics wiki at ironchariots.org. And that's it for announcements. So, Jen, why don't you tell us what we're talking about today?
Okay. Well, I want to talk about the naturalistic fallacy. But before I get started on that, I wanted to introduce something to you. This is a human trait profile. Sometimes when biologists are talking about a human trait, they will describe it using kind of a profiling technique, just similar to what, for example, criminal profilers do. And so this profile I'm going to give you is for a human trait. So as I describe this trait, I want you to see if you can figure out what I'm talking about. Okay. It exists in the form of two basic orientations. Over 90% of the population exhibits the majority orientation, while slightly less than 8% exhibit the minority orientation. And there are a few individuals who are equally oriented both ways. Historical evidence suggests that the incidence of the two orientations has been constant for 5 millennia. The percentage of people with the minority orientation is constant across cultures, races, and religions. The trait itself is not externally apparent. The only way to identify a person's orientation is to observe the person's behavior. Throughout history, those with the minority orientation have been forced to behave as if they had the majority orientation, usually through coercion or social pressure. The trait itself is not a behavior. Those with the minority orientation can behave as if they have the minority orientation.
Oh, the majority.
Oh, excuse me, the majority orientation, yes. Thank you. But the underlying neurological orientation remains unchanged. Neither orientation is a disease or mental illness, neither is pathological. Neither orientation is chosen. Signs of one's orientation are detectable in early childhood, often by age 2 or 3, and some researchers believe that it's defined before birth. Some researchers have hypothesized that the minority orientation is related to prenatal exposure to certain hormones, although recent evidence disputes this. Adoption studies show that the trait is not learned. It's independent of the adoptive parent's orientation. Twin studies show that the concordance rate for identical twins, that is, the chance that both twins share the same orientation, is 50% higher than the expected rate. So the expected rate would be the background rate for the general population. In twins, it is 50% higher, that is for identical twins. What that suggests is that there's a strong genetic component to this. The incidence of the minority orientation is significantly higher in males than females. There is no direct parent-offspring correlation for the two orientations. The minority orientation does appear to run in families in a loose but recognizably genetic pattern. And finally, the pattern shows a maternal effect. The minority orientation in men appears to be passed through the maternal line. So think about that as we jump into this topic here. Think about what trait am I talking about? Okay. So the reason I introduced this human trait is because of a series of emails that we received a couple of months ago, in which the authors of those emails seem to have some trouble understanding why we universally condemn murder, but we regard homosexuality, at least the people involved in this show, as a benign trait. So in this case, the email authors committed the naturalistic fallacy in that they equated the word natural with good or advantageous or some other positive attribute. And they believe that unnatural implies some negative attribute. So let's talk a little bit about some of the quotes from these emails, because they're very interesting here. So one of the authors of these emails says, "Of course there are homosexuals in every culture, but you can't say that because of this fact it's something natural." Okay. And again, he clearly doesn't understand what natural means. I mean, there's actually a definition of natural, which is just, it's present in or produced by nature. That's all it means.
Okay, not artificial.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's conflating natural with good or some other. In his case, he defines it as advantageous. Another quote, these guys, both authors seem to have a real issue with defining homosexuality's impact and murder's impact in terms of how many reproducing individuals you have in society and whether these behaviors remove reproducing individuals from society. So one of these it says, by being gay you can't reproduce and therefore you weren't able to fit to the theory of evolution at all. English wasn't this guy's native language, so there's a little bit of an issue there, but you can kind of understand where he's going. He did clarify later on. He said his basic claims are homosexuals can't reproduce, not that they don't, but they can't. Because of this, homosexuality doesn't fit with the intent of evolution. I didn't know evolution had an intent.
Right.
Therefore, homosexuality is not natural. Okay. I'll get to some of the inaccuracies in these quotes, but I want to get through these quotes here real quick. Another quote was that homosexuals should be isolated because a society with too many quickly ceases to exist. And, I mean, it's like, okay, you can't catch the gay, guys.
Yeah, and I would love to know what constitutes too many homosexuals.
Yeah. On a planet that's rapidly approaching 7 billion people, even if everything that we've talked about so far were true, that homosexuals can't reproduce or whatever,
right.
Why would that be a negative?
Yeah, we're hardly endangered.
Yeah. And the last one here, homosexuality is not natural, so people who are gay don't act natural. They may act normal, but not natural. If you think this is natural, you can't deny murder is alike. So he's saying that unless I declare that homosexuality is not natural, then I can't condemn murder. And so,
yeah, I mean, he's actually comparing gay with killer.
right.
And saying that they're the same.
Because having sex with somebody is exactly the same as murdering them. You know?
If I can just interject something, that it's kind of funny to me because, you know, I've got like an Italian heritage, and there was a series of commercials that came on, I guess it was probably a couple of years ago, from a contact lens manufacturer that was selling colored contacts.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I remember about this particular, I don't remember the brand, thankfully, because I don't want to name any brand names, but what they were, the commercials were talking, they would show a really beautiful woman, they'd be talking about her beauty, and then they would say, you know, like your lips were as red as a rose, and then they would say, like, your eyes as brown as mud. And so it was like in trying to sell these colored contacts, they wanted to insult people with brown eyes and say your eyes are like mud, because what you really want is beautiful blue eyes, beautiful green eyes. And the reason you would market these contacts to people with brown eyes is why? Because most people on this planet have brown eyes. Right. So you've got all of Asia, all of India, all of you know, the Mediterranean, all of South America, all of every native tribe anywhere. It's, you know, there's just a lot of people on the planet with brown eyes. It is definitely the predominant trait. It's a predominant genetic eye color. But that doesn't mean that having blue eyes is like being Ted Bundy. You know, I mean, it's just because it's not the common trait doesn't mean it's a non-natural trait, or that it's a trait that doesn't, or that is somehow better or worse. It's just simply more rare. There are, we talked about, I think, on the phone, that there's people who are born hermaphrodites. You cannot dispute this person has, like, you know, very, compared to the rest of the population, they have very confused sex organs when they're born. It's not the norm in as far as numbers. But this is not, there was nothing unnatural about the person's birth, about their production, about, you know, I mean, they were born and genetically put together just like anybody else, and something was different about them that made them unique in regard to the, you know, percentages of human population. But that doesn't make them wrong or mean that there's something bad about it, or that it's just simply, it was still absolutely natural. It's an absolutely natural human being with a natural birth. And people, I think, just have this idea that if it deviates from the standard, that somehow there's something really wrong with that, or it's suspect. But it's weird because you have these other traits like eye color that nobody blinks twice. Nobody says blue eyes are evil, or having two different colored eyes is evil, or, you know, it's like, no, it's just, it's simply what you would expect.
Well, and it's interesting that, you know, you brought up intersex conditions, because a lot of those are found predominantly in cultures that practice consanguineous marriages, where you've got very closely related people. So you've got lots of first cousins marrying each other, and so a gene for a rare condition suddenly is much more prevalent in this small population of people. And the interesting thing about this is that these small populations are typically held together by some very, you know, strict traditional culture or religious belief or something like that, and they want their sons and daughters to marry only within this small group so that they stay pure.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so basically what you're doing is guaranteeing that there's going to be a generation of people that will exhibit some rare.
Yeah, you could break down your genes like that. I mean, you know, really cause some problems.
Yeah.
I've heard, I haven't done any independent research on it or read about it, but I remember seeing a program where they talked about incidence of birth defects in Amish societies is increasing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true or not. You know, the show seemed pretty reasonable, and you know, if that's, it makes sense to me if you're interbreeding on that level. You know, it's almost like when people breed dogs. And whenever you have like a specific dog breed, there's always like the known physical problems with the dog. And yeah, I mean, that's, diversity is a good thing.
Yeah, and they even have a name for it. It's called the founder effect, where you have one individual that carries some mutation who, for whatever reason, has a disproportionate effect on the genetic profile of subsequent generations, either because, you know, he's got 25 wives and, you know, he's, you know, 150 kids or something like that, or You know,
Sure.
in the case of dog breeding, you know, you're breeding dogs for a specific set of traits, and you don't realize until generations later that those traits carry some baggage.
Sure.
So it's, you know, it's all good until it's not.
Until somebody breeds something bad.
Yeah. But the interesting thing, because getting to genetic baggage here, some of these quotes about homosexuality were pretty interesting because it's clear that neither of these individuals that wrote to us knew very much about what they were talking about at all. Because one of those, and there was this assertion that homosexuality implies some kind of reduced fitness, both for the individual and for the population that has a large number of homosexuals in it. And that's not actually true. In fact, it appears that the opposite may be true. There was a recent study that was done in the Public Library of Science 1, and it was about genetic factors influencing male homosexuality. There's actually multiple factors that are associated with male homosexuality, and it turns out that there's this constellation of factors that they also increase a woman's or the man's female relatives' fertility. So what happens is that women who have male homosexuals in their bloodline tend to have more children. And the increase in children from these women more than offsets the loss of children that those males would produce. And they went on to further test this, and they found out that male homosexuals in a family, it not only increases the reproductive rate over time, but in cases where fertility is declining because of other factors, the presence of that sequence of genes actually acts as a buffer for the decline in fertility. So it's one of those things that it might have actually an evolutionary purpose. It could be that homosexuality is a genetic marker for something else that's actually being selected for. So that was one of the items there. The other thing is that these assumptions in these quotes ignore the benefits of kin selection. So non-reproducing individuals are a benefit to social species.
Right, and I think that's an important thing too, is that a lot of these people are confusing the idea of success, like genetic success and reproductive success,
right,
with individuals. And when you have a social species, the individual genetic reproduction is not necessarily as important. And it's, for example, you'll have something like wolves or dogs where you've got breeding pairs. Mm-hmm. And then you've got like an entire society that's set up just to protect the children of this breeding pair.
Right.
So here you have a lot of individuals that are reproductively accessible, but they're not breeding. And in fact, most of them aren't breeding.
Right.
And just a few are breeding, and yet that's a successful model for, canines. So it's when people start to talk about, like, this individual, I could easily look at that model and say, well, all those individuals are not fit. Mm-hmm. None of them are breeding.
Right.
But they have a close kinship with the breeding pair, and their society is built around the cohesion and the support that they offer to one another, and so their influence in protecting the breeding pair's offspring is beneficial to them, and it does ensure the fitness of that particular pack to go forward, as long as the pack survives and the pair continues to breed. And you can interchange that breeding pair. You can get a new alpha female, new alpha male. That can change in and out, but usually it's just all within the family, I guess.
Yeah.
The society.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we already commented on that thing about isolating homosexuals would be absurd because you can't catch the gay.
Oh, that's.
I mean, that's just.
Yeah, homosexuals should be isolated. That was very weird to me.
Where do you think homosexuals come from? They come from straight people.
Yeah, I thought that was extremely bizarre. The phrasing is always, I think, very weird to me. And the word natural, I think, is tossed around way too loosely and without real forethought or without any real consideration to what's being actually said.
Well, and I think you and I were talking at one point, and you pointed out that exclusive homosexuality is a fairly recent phenomenon. You know,
Did I say it?
I think so. Well, it sounds good anyways. It sounds like something you'd say. So,
What did I mean by that?
well, basically, historically, homosexuals, in fact, I think until maybe the 19th century, there wasn't even a word for it. There was just a word for the behavior, which was called sodomy. But historically, homosexuals in a population have gotten married, they've reproduced, and then they've carried on these extramarital affairs on the side with same-sex partners. So this whole idea that we have today of these exclusive homosexuals in society, that didn't exist probably even 100 years ago.
Yeah, honestly, I know that, like, you know, Greece, they had some pretty open standards.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly how that worked. I know they had, like, mentoring, you know, things where it was involved in mentoring. But yeah, I think the idea of what we had talked about, if I recall right, was this kind of spectrum.
Yeah.
And you said there's a scale.
Yeah, the Kinsey scale.
That talks about, you know, how a person identifies and how they behave. And the thing that I remembered from that, and I had just kind of briefly looked into it, the thing that I recalled was the interesting difference between how people identified their sexual orientation versus what they were doing. So they would report, I'm having same-sex relationships, but I identify as a heterosexual. I consider myself heterosexual, but I also have these, you know, affairs with same-sex people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they are confused. I think that they actually identify as heterosexual, but that they have same-sex relationships sometimes.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's a big difference between what a person identifies as this is the thrust of what I normally am attracted to, and yet, you know, yeah, I can deviate from that. And
well, and I think that until fairly recently, if you wanted a family, then, you know, there was this heterosexual path that you had to follow for that.
yeah,
You know,
or you adopted a nephew,
yeah, or
brought him
something,
to your estate
yeah.
and raised him.
Yeah.
Exactly.
but you know, until fairly recently, there wasn't this concept of, you know, gay and lesbian families.
Right.
That just didn't
Yeah.
exist.
You had the confirmed bachelor and the old maid, and
right.
they did not
yeah.
have kids.
And
Right.
those two guys, they're just roommates.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people said, hey, you know, I want these things, and, you know, I can get the sex part on the side, you know, with a willing partner. And in fact, there was a guy named Humphreys who did a really influential study, I think it was back in the 60s, and he published it in a book called Tea Room Trade. And if you've never read that book, that's really worth reading. But what he did was he went to tea rooms, which were public restrooms where men who wanted to have anonymous sex with other men would frequent these restrooms.
And see, I would be thinking it would be like a place to get tea. I'd be like, oh, this is not what I thought at all.
Well, they were obviously public
This is the only
restrooms.
menu? Yeah. Wow.
And so, anyway, he set himself up as the lookout in case the cops raided, because these things were
Okay.
frequently raided by
Okay.
police. And so he set himself up as the lookout, and the guys would come in and they would do whatever they did, and then unbeknownst to them, he was writing their license plate numbers down. And he ran their plate numbers through the DMV and got their addresses. And so, like, 6 months later, he showed up with a survey. And he was just doing some demographic research, and would they like to participate in a survey? And of course, he was dressed totally different when he showed up at their door, so they didn't recognize him as this guy that was in this tea room, and who pays attention to the lookout anyway, right? That's not what you're there for. So, so he gets demographic information. What he finds out is that most of these guys are heterosexuals, they have families, they have jobs, you know, and, you know, their attitudes on a lot of things are just indistinguishable from anyone else, but they have this other life
Yeah.
And they go to these other places.
And I want to point out, I mean, I'm distinguishing in my head. I mean, I'm not claiming that there aren't people who get married in order to try to conform.
Right.
That they are really gay and they're getting married because they just don't want to be found out in society. I'm literally talking about the guy who says, yes, I'm married, I'm straight, or the woman that says I'm married, I'm straight, but I also have these same-sex relationships. Somebody that's openly acknowledging this and saying this is how I identify.
Yeah.
But there's definitely people that I've known who, have a past life where they were pretending to be straight because they didn't want to deal with the prejudice, or because they were suppressing something that later they finally said, I can't suppress this anymore, I can't live like this anymore. And honestly, I just think that it's an absolute, I know it's not illegal, but in my mind, it's an absolute crime to ask people to live that way when what they're doing is really none of my business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty benign thing for people, unless you're religious and you think that, or like these guys seem to have this underlying fear that if homosexuality increases unchecked, then you're going to threaten human existence.
And honestly, I want to point something out about those quotes. A lot of the email that we get that expresses these sorts of, I probably can't be kind to the statements, but that expresses these sorts of ideas, comes from atheists.
These guys are atheists.
I'm surprised, but I don't want to give away the wrong idea. These are atheist quotes.
These guys are atheists. Now, I don't know, interesting and disappointing as the quotes were on homosexuality, the quotes they had on murder were absolutely frightening. So, listen to this, okay? If murder is in someone's nature, how are they ethically or morally wrong? And again, this is that naturalistic fallacy, because, if this is part of their nature, then it must be good, right? And so, the thing to remember here is that calling a behavior natural doesn't imply any kind of moral judgment on it. So, labeling it good or bad is a moral judgment that we apply after we assess its impact on us.
Right. And that's the thing. I remember on one of the programs that I saw on wild dogs, there was a female wild dog that started killing the pups. And I'm sure that for that dog, whatever she was doing was quite normal. Like that in her head, that was the thing to do, to go kill the pups. But, society doesn't have to accept behavior that threatens society. But the idea of a percentage of the population being homosexual is not the same as going out and killing babies. It's just not the same sort of threat. No one's coming into my home and invading anything of mine, threatening my property, people in my family. Nobody being gay is hurting me at all. And that's, I think, the big delineation is that they're trying to promote that this is a social ill. And it's really not a social ill. I guess what they're trying to express is, well, if everybody became gay, then we would just go extinct or something. Which and
they did express that concern. That
to be honest, I'm not that concerned about it. I mean, if people were to go extinct because they chose to go extinct, I mean, I guess that's our right as a species or something. I don't know. It's not like I'm promoting it or anything. I just want to say that, as far as as long as we're not committing genocide on one another and forcing each other to go extinct, if I'm just saying I don't want to have children, I don't really see how some heterosexual couple saying I don't want to have kids is any worse than someone being gay.
Right.
Why is it any less of a choice or less of a capacity? And what if somebody doesn't have maternal instincts for whatever reason? I mean, is that some crime?
Well, and I would say that if someone doesn't have maternal instincts and they know this up front, that's valuable information, and you should definitely not have children just because society expects you to.
Yeah, I think that's a really bad idea, in fact, to have kids because somebody else expects you to.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is I would see a huge difference between people saying, let's just go extinct, let's not have kids anymore, versus saying, let's start dropping nukes and just killing off all the humans on the planet. I mean, if you don't see some sort of delineation between us killing each other versus just saying, I'm not going to reproduce, then there's, I don't even know that there's some common enough ground to talk about it.
Yeah, and we were rapidly approaching this point with both of these guys, because, another quote was, You said that homosexuality is not maladaptive, then neither is murder and nearly any sick attitude humans represent. So, and then finally, the last quote I want to point out with murder was, the guy said, I would point out that murder can be considered an application of the often mistaken maxim, survival of the fittest, or rather a perpetuation of evolution via natural selection, and thus is not in fact a detriment to society at all. While murder has more negative impact on a personal level, especially if you're the subject of that murder, the change to the gene pool which occurs can only be positive in terms of promoting valued traits and removing unfavorable traits. So essentially he's defending murder as a vehicle for evolution, as some type of natural selection.
Yeah, and in social species that wouldn't work.
Yeah, in fact, it's, as you pointed out before, it's quite the opposite in social species.
Yeah, things don't work quite the same. If the survival depends on the cohesion and the strength of a society, you really don't want an individual in that society running around causing insecurity and damage. And that's the difference. It's like going out and causing somebody else damage is not the same as me sitting at home doing something that's no one's business. I mean, I don't.
Right.
I just do not see the correlation there.
Well, and this guy's got all wrapped around the axle over the impact that it would have on the gene pool, because if you remove somebody's genes from the gene pool by murdering them, then that's the same as if you're gay, because you've taken a reproducing individual out.
I guess what I don't get is, why don't they see it as the same as somebody who chooses not to have kids? Like, what is the difference why you don't breed?
Or even
Like,
someone who is having non-procreative sex. If you ever have sex and use birth control.
But my point is, even if you said I'm going to be celibate.
Yeah.
It's the same result.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that saying, why isn't there some hatred in our society of people who are celibate, or people who, why don't we have this sort of venom toward anybody that doesn't reproduce?
Right.
You would if that was really your problem.
Yeah. And one of the things I was going to point out on this is that our moral assessment of murder as bad is not based on how many reproducing individuals it removes from the gene pool. So, when we're deciding what to do about a murderer, we don't ask the question about, was this person fertile or not? We don't make any assessment of that. So, that's a complete non-issue. The other thing is, they seem to be saying that, murder's natural, therefore it's genetic, or there's some kind of underlying trait. And so there's a couple things I wanted to point out on that. Murder may be a natural behavior, meaning it does occur in nature. We do observe that. However, there's no evidence that it's genetic, for most people anyway, and in fact there's strong evidence that it isn't. At least it's not a selected for trait.
I think the type of murder that we're used to seeing probably is not genetically oriented. I mean, when you talk about murder in nature, like even a chimpanzee group, you're probably talking about like some severe aggression.
Right.
Like a severely aggressive individual that just goes crazy, like gets into a fight and then kills another individual, which whether or not they intended to kill that other individual or whether they just intended to harm or threaten, you can't really tell. There's no way to ask the chimp, did you mean to kill this other chimp? But with human beings, the idea of like selectively stalking people, in the case of like a serial killer, the idea of murdering somebody for insurance money, I'm just thinking that that's probably not a natural trait that you're born with. But now the idea of aggressing, like you get into a bar fight, you punch somebody, they go down, they hit their head on the corner of the bar, they die. Or even getting angry and shooting somebody and meaning to kill them. That might be the sort of aggressiveness that I guess there could be some sort of natural aggression that would make a person, just get really aggressive like that, or more, but still, anger management works, folks. So, there is help, even if you have feel like it's just a natural tendency of yours to get angry, you really can learn to control that.
Well, and one of the things that I'd point out is that murder rates vary pretty significantly across different cultures and different nations. I mean, if you look at the murder rate in the U.S. and compare it to the murder rate in Canada, and if you look at the demographics of these two countries, they're so similar, but the murder rates are vastly different. So that tells you right there's not a strong genetic component if there is at all.
That's actually a really good thing, like what you were talking about in your profile, your human trait profile. that was one of the things that it mentioned, was that when you do a cross-cultural examination, you see the rates are pretty similar.
Yeah.
And when you have these things that are deviating really highly within cultures, I mean, you just don't see that many suicide bombers in Iowa. So it's like, when there's something, going on where it's really big in this culture, it's not really big in that culture, I agree. That's really, an argument for maybe this is culturally derived.
Yeah. And so we get down to the part where, why all this matters. Why does it matter when people commit this naturalistic fallacy? And bottom line is that not understanding this, it kind of underlies this confusion about why we can make these judgments about murder versus homosexuality. But let's take, for example, if we consider murder to be natural, that doesn't mean we have to think it's good. So we can acknowledge that maybe this is natural behavior because we actually do observe it in nature. We observe it in animal species sometimes.
Sure.
So yeah, it's natural, but that doesn't mean we can call it good.
Or even that we have to put up with it.
Right.
Society can say it may be natural, but it's dangerous to society, and so we need to, curb this individual's capacity to hurt us, to hurt the rest of us. I mean, that's totally okay.
Yeah, and that's why we remove individuals who commit murder from our society, both as a deterrent for future acts and to remove a known harm from our society. We don't judge murder to be morally wrong because we think it's unnatural. And in fact, that would be the moralistic fallacy.
Right.
We judge murder to be wrong because of the impact that it has on its victims. The number of victims doesn't matter. So if you kill one person or you kill 100, if you've committed murder, then we judge that on the basis of the harm to the victims.
Right, and potential future harm.
Exactly.
And so, also the thing is, if you're judging natural as good and unnatural as bad, I think it was somebody, I can't remember who it was, that said, maybe you should have a hemlock smoothie.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things that are in nature that are not good.
Yeah.
And there's some things, and I'm sitting here with a phone line, 2 computers, a table, chairs, dressed in clothes, got my hair cut, and if I thought that anything unnatural was somehow evil or wrong, I'd be in a world of hurt right now as a total hypocrite.
Yeah.
Because I drove a car here on roads that are paved, and I
Yeah.
live in a completely artificial environment. I'm surprised there's birds.
Yeah.
And
the people that did this were typing on a computer.
Right. We've got people calling us on a phone line.
Yeah.
This is, so natural is not always synonymous with good, and artifice is not always synonymous with evil.
Yeah. So the naturalistic fallacy, when you apply it to human traits, brings its own problems here. Okay. If you claim that something is unnatural, there's this implied assumption that there's some external cause, and if there's an external cause, then you can fix it. And so in the case of homosexuality, this leads to some false assumptions, one of which was that gays have to recruit in order to fill our ranks or something.
In fact, you should look for the gay recruiting station in your area.
Yeah, because I need a new toaster oven.
You get points. Like green stamps or something.
Yep. No, you didn't know that, right? If you turn a straight woman, you get a toaster oven.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, that was in the Ellen episode.
That's why you're putting pressure on me. You want that toaster?
Oh yeah, I mean,
I thought you liked me.
I know. But actually, one guy that emailed us actually suggested that you could raise your children to be gay from birth. Okay. Now the problem with that is you can't even raise your kids to be straight from birth. So
people have tried.
Yeah. Yeah,
and failed.
Yeah, believe me, my parents tried to raise me straight from birth. Didn't work. And the other assumption is that gays can be fixed, and this is where we get this reparative therapy thing, which it doesn't change a person's orientation at all. It just makes them miserable.
Oh, I'm sure. To me, that's abuse. I just think that's abusive to do that to a kid. First of all, to tell your child that there's something wrong with them when there's nothing really wrong, and then to put that kind of pressure on somebody to not be what they can't help they are, and tell them that it's bad and wrong, and God hates them, and you won't accept them. And I've always, I don't know, I can't understand the idea of that being your child, and the one thing that's wrong with them is that they're gay. And this is what's freaking you out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like someone came and said he's, being arrested for serial murders. I mean,
I know, yeah.
it blows my mind.
I know.
People would do that to their own
I
child.
even have some people ask me, well, what are you going to do if it turns out your kid is gay? I'm like, who cares?
Would you be able to accept him?
It's like, it's like, what?
You're like, man, I'm counting on it.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do is raise him gay.
Well, actually, his sexual orientation is fairly apparent.
Yeah, you were telling
right
me about
now.
his little story. I don't know how much you want to share about your
Yeah,
kid, but that was pretty cute.
If I ask him, if he kisses girls at school, his typical response is a very smug, "Oh yes."
He's the little Casanovini.
Yeah, and so yeah, his sexual orientation is already fairly apparent. So he's straight. Anyway, not that it matters. I don't care. As long as he's happy, that's all we care about. Okay, so at this point, I think you should be getting some idea of why the naturalistic fallacy applied to human traits really has potential to cause a lot of harm. What I want you to do now is have you figured out what trait I was talking about earlier when I gave you that trait profile?
Yeah, we're back to the human trait profile quiz.
Okay, so what saith the chat room? Let's
What are
see.
we talking about here?
Well, I probably can't see.
2 basic orientations, right?
Yeah.
Over 90% of the population exhibits the majority orientation, slightly less than 8% the minority. You see a big correlation between identical twins.
Yeah.
People have been forced to behave like they have the majority orientation throughout history. There's, let's see, slightly higher in males. It doesn't matter if you're adopted. What do we got? What are the guesses?
Well, I think they might have it in here. So
Really? Did somebody get it?
could be, yeah. All right, yeah.
They Googled it.
They probably
You
did.
cheated.
Yeah. Okay, so what does the studio audience say? Handedness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did get it.
So you guys got it right.
Okay, well, they couldn't have Googled it, so
Yeah.
maybe it was that easy. But
Yeah, could be. So anyway, yeah, the trait we were talking about is handedness. So here's what I want you to do.
And by the way, I'm normal. There's nothing wrong with
That's
me.
right. Normal and natural. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. Everybody in the audience out there, using your non-dominant hand, write your name on a piece of paper.
Oh, I don't even have to try. I already know. I'm pathetic.
And
I can't. I'm like useless. My left hand. They could cut my left arm off. And it wouldn't, I mean, I don't even think I would be impaired.
Well, if you're like most people, you can manage to get something legible on the paper.
Then I'm not most people.
But the question is, how does it feel to use your non-dominant hand?
Not natural.
Okay? That's right. Now here's the other question. Did your hand preference actually change just because you adopted left-handed or right-handed behavior? No, it didn't. So that's the problem here. We've got...
And how much fun would it be to have to use your left hand all the time from now on? What if you lost your dominant hand and you had to use your left hand? How happy would that make you? Not very. It wouldn't make me very happy.
So incidentally, a lot of the things that we talked about, the twin studies, for example, illustrated that there was probably a genetic component to left-handedness. So for a long time, people thought that this was true. And in 2007, some researchers at Oxford University identified a gene associated with left-handedness. So there is actually a gene associated with left-handedness. This gene also influences a person's risk of developing schizophrenia, which validates some prior observations that left-handed people seem to have a higher incidence of this disorder. And this actually raises an important question, and that is, what if schizophrenia is the desirable trait and left-handedness is just a marker? So why would schizophrenia be a desirable trait? There's a guy named Robert Sapolsky who, he's actually a neuroscientist. And he has done a lot of work on some mental disorders like schizophrenia and OCD.
Yeah.
There associated, schizophrenia and OCD, actually schizotypal personality disorder is associated with people who are highly religious and who have religious visions. And so...
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you're going to hallucinate, I can see how that would...
So these would have been the shamans in primitive society, and this would not have impaired their reproductive fitness. In fact, they would have been highly sought after as potential mates. So it could be that schizophrenia is a desirable trait.
And that's true. I do remember that depending on what culture you're in, sometimes madness is considered desirable, and sometimes it's not. I mean, sometimes it's considered really bad, and sometimes it's considered touched by the gods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't realize it was correlated to left-handedness, though.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about the concordance rate for left-handedness, so the concordance rate for left-handedness is 12% in monozygotic or identical twins. Okay. The concordance rate for homosexuality in identical twins is 50%. Okay. So we've got a 50% increase over the background rate for left-handedness. The increase over the background rate for homosexuality in identical twins is over 500%. So what that means is that it's suggestive of a strong genetic component.
Yeah, if left-handedness can be, considered to be demonstrated as genetic by that correlation, and then it goes up that much in homosexuality, yes, that would increase the guess that, this should be genetic.
Okay. And at this point, I'm going to wrap up because we've got actually
somebody asking the
Ed on line 1. Yeah, sure, let's go ahead and...
Okay, Ed has a topic...
on line 1, there we go.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
this question is, I guess, related to our topic, so...
Yeah.
Okay, we've got Ed in Austin.
Yeah, hey, how y'all doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Long-time fan of the show. I don't want to say long time, but maybe about 3 months I've become an atheist, so...
Oh, cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, really. Anyways, I had a conversation with my brother, he's very religious, and we had a conversation last weekend about homosexuality, and of course, I think people are born like that. He thinks people choose to be like that, and I was just wondering if there are any significant studies to suggest that people are born that way?
Yeah, actually there's a researcher at the National Institutes of Health called Dean Hamer, and I think it was in 1993, he identified a gene on the X chromosome, XQ28, that is associated with male homosexuality. And the media inaccurately dubbed this the gay gene. It's not a gay gene, because that's not the only thing that influences whether a man is homosexual or not.
Right.
But the interesting thing about that is that Hamer's results have been replicated many times since then. And, and in that intervening period, several other genes associated with male homosexuality have been identified. So
interesting. And another thing, another question, are human beings the only animals to actually exhibit homosexuality? No.
I think, have there been any mammal species that have not?
I'm not aware.
I'm not aware of any mammals.
But yes, it does impact other species as well.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was Ricky Gervais has a pretty funny routine you could probably find on YouTube about homosexuality in animals.
Love that guy.
Yeah. It's a really funny presentation.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty widespread in the animal kingdom.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, very interesting talking to y'all, and well, I guess y'all have a good one.
All right. Well, thank you.
Hey, come to Threadgills.
Yeah.
Hey, I might actually meet y'all there.
Okay, great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks.
Okay, and then we have another one that's sort of topic related.
Okay.
That has to do with a question, I guess, or a comment on evolution. So let's try
Julie
in Brooklyn, you're on.
Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm the one on richarddawkins.net known as In Your Face New Yorker, if anybody's interested.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah, I wanted to point out something. I didn't know my name was that funny. Yes, one thing I want to point out was that I think that, not accepting evolution is dangerous, and not because it's evolution, but because it's a scientific claim that has been verified over and over again. I think that creates a world that's safe for rejecting science, and if you reject one scientific claim, why shouldn't you reject another, such as HIV causes AIDS? Well, something like that did happen. If you recall, in the 1980s, there's a kid, Ryan White, who was the poster boy for AIDS, and he was shunned by the community. They shot a bullet through his house. People, like scientists, were coming out and saying, this is how you can get AIDS. You get from this virus called HIV, and it's not transmitted casually. People weren't listening. Meanwhile, I talked to this guy over in Finland, which is a secular country that respects science, and he said there was no AIDS panic in the 80s like there was here. Once HIV was identified, it was taught to kids as young as 6 years old in science textbooks. And other parts of Europe, I've been told the same thing. And also, this also goes for like global warming. If you can reject evolution and we need to respect that, why shouldn't we respect somebody rejecting global warming? I think not respecting science is simply dangerous.
Well, yeah, I agree, and I'm sure you know we here in Texas we have a real issue with our State Board of Education.
Yes.
Because they want to rewrite science textbooks to conform to.
Well, they definitely want to undermine evolution.
Yeah.
In an effort to bolster creationism, even if they're not.
And one of their goals was also undermining global warming and the science behind it. It's a general anti-science view. This view of, well, science can't explain everything, therefore anything goes.
And I know we can't get too political, but yeah, just to say, take your school board elections seriously.
Yes.
And do your homework and make sure you know when they're coming up, and do your best to get somebody in there that's qualified, not just who's a member of, I don't know, some religious organization or has particular religious views, but maybe, somebody who actually has some background in education and themselves shows a penchant for understanding education and promoting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that whole AIDS denialism thing. We've got the vaccine denialism thing, and
it's that vaccines is a big conspiracy to try to kill people.
Yeah, I think, Julie, you might be actually near suicidal if you could see some of the emails we get on our list that demonstrate.
I've seen it all. There was somebody on my Facebook list last week who befriended me because I cracked a joke about wanting to slap the Pope. I didn't crack it to her face, but she just happened to see it, and she befriended me and said, this isn't something I find funny, nor do I take lightly.
Now, she defriended you? She defriended you?
She defriended me because of that.
Did you get like a notification or something?
No, when I notice that a friend is missing, I always check to see who it is.
Oh, okay.
I know that sounds really crazy. That's just how I do it.
I was just curious what happens when you defriend somebody on Facebook, but okay, so you just drop off and they don't know unless...
I figure out who it is.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Julie. I appreciate your comments, and I think we agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we've got Justin from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Hi, Justin.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for holding.
Oh, no problem. So I sent an email to, I believe it was Tracie who responded to my email. I was talking about a new argument I want to construct on my blog, something about love letters from God, because it's crazy that all Christians say that we should love God, we're compelled to love Him, He created us, He does all these great things for us, but I don't really find any compelling evidence for accepting the claim that He exists. And it seems quite strange that if in real life someone left letters at my door, someone claimed that, she was watching me all the time, that
I remember
she loves me, but yet I don't know who this person is. I mean, a lot of people talk about her. I've never actually seen her. I've never met her. So it seems to be a really odd thing that we're supposed to love a being just because they love us.
Yeah, and I think my response was something like, it's even worse than if you were getting letters at your door. It would be like somebody came to you with letters that were 2,000 years old and unsigned, and then said, this letter, even though it's addressed to the church at Corinth, is really intended for you. And it says that you need to do all this stuff, and that someone loves you.
Yeah, it's a lot worse in this case, because
it's pretty crazy.
I mean, imagine if the letter said something like, if you don't love me, I'm going to kidnap you and shoot you, and all these bad things are going to happen to you.
Right.
I mean, I cannot be justified in loving a person like that, and I think this is the same case with Christianity, but it's a lot worse.
It's when you deconstruct it, sometimes it does seem a little absurd. Yeah, I can't argue. If I could, I would still be a Christian.
But in recent discussions with theists and ministers and pastors that I speak to, this one lady told me that, well, deep down in your heart, you knew if someone did that in real life, you would still love the person. But I said, no, hold on. I would love a person who threatens to kill me and kidnap me if I didn't return this love?
Wow. Yeah. No,
Okay.
I can't. I don't even know what to respond to other than if somebody felt that way. I mean, I guess if that's your personal thing, that you would still love somebody who threatens your life, or threatens to torture you or harm you or says coercion. I mean, I don't know. If I had a daughter, for example, that was dating somebody who said, I love you so much, and if you ever leave me, I'll break both your arms, I would tell her, get away as soon as possible, and we're going to get a restraining order. And I don't want you to ever be in touch with this person again. I don't know how else.
Exactly. So I don't know how the Christians can be justified in this. They try to get out by saying, oh, it's free will, you can choose, but we shouldn't have excessive punishment. A belief should not be predicated on fear, punishment, or torture, or anything like this at all.
Usually what I hear is it's sort of like a variation on the free will. It says that, it's almost like, well, I'm not breaking your arms. It's this other person that's going to break your arms if you don't love me. And I just, you're just choosing to let him break your arms. And the problem with that is that if I have the capacity to control the guy that's going to break your arms, then I'm kind of responsible if he breaks your arms. You know what I mean? If I can stop him and I don't. So, yeah, it's like no matter how you slice it, the fact is it's a plan that's set up to punish people who don't want to worship you. And it's very weird. I mean, if a human being did that, everybody would think, what a monster.
Right, but there's for some reason some exception. But I've yet to hear a good rebuttal to my argument.
And it's not even. I mean, you would think that the best somebody could muster, if let's say they said, well, this is a god and not a human being. It almost seems like the best you could muster is, you better do what he says because you don't want to go to hell. But really, it converts into this whole, it's love. It's love and it's mercy, and it's like, how in the world did that become love and mercy? If anything, it's just like, we better do what he says because he's psycho. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. But it's also another form of love that you were discussing about the hymns, that love is supposed to be sending your son to earth to have him crucified on a suicide mission, and this is supposed to step in and forgive people.
Right.
But it's also immoral on that part because, God is a third party, perhaps. I mean, if I, for example, went into someone's house in Florida who a man battered his wife and said, oh, you're forgiven for battering your wife, they would look at me as if I were crazy. I can't do that.
What if
the wife has to be the one to forgive.
What if he said, here's my child, kill him, and then I'll forgive you for killing your wife? I mean, it's just weird. It's just weird because, I mean, you're talking about, supposedly this is the God who gets to make the rules. And it's like, wow, this is the plan he came up with? Seriously? This is the best he could do? I'm going to send the guy to Earth, and he's going to be really good, and he's going to tell you to love each other, and then I want you to kill him. And you need to kill him, because that's the only way this is going to work. And it needs to be pretty brutal, because I want you to feel real bad about it when you do it.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I mean, it's kind of like the pedophile who co-opts one of his victims to recruit other victims. And then this kid feels really guilty, and he won't say anything because he's participated in this.
Except I don't think they feel guilty.
Well,
I think it's like, it's all love and happy.
Yeah, they think
it is all love and happiness. It's just like the swirling stars of a cult member. I mean, they would recognize it in a heartbeat. If it was somebody else, in some other religion doing it, they would be like, this is grotesque. But if it's your own religion, it's perfectly okay. Yeah, I've probably said enough to piss off a lot of people. I'm sure we'll get a lot of emails about
I hope so.
negative attitude toward religion. But all right, well, is there anything else, Justin?
Oh, a second point in recent debates, I pressed the ministers and the pastors on the point of, well, if you have this belief, it should be demonstrable. You should have a good reason for it. And the one lady said, well, it doesn't matter if God actually exists. I don't need evidence. It just works in my life. And it really matters that people just believe in it. And I've also heard this from a theologian before, too.
Yeah, that's the idea that if a belief is useful, that it's okay to hold. And it's not that I don't understand what it is they're arguing, But literally what it boils down to is they're saying, I don't care whether what I believe is true or not. And I don't, and what gets me when it comes to a proselytizing religion is you're basically saying, and I don't care if I'm lying to other people and trying to convince them to believe lies. That's where I would kind of draw a line. It's like, on the one hand, if you personally want to believe lies and you say, hey, it's best for me to believe my husband's not cheating because if I divorce him, I'm going to lose a lot of money. It's like, it's one thing if it works for you to believe a lie. But when you start going around when you say, I don't know if it's true or not, I don't care if it's true or not, but then you're out preaching it, that to me is kind of where I draw a moralistic line where I'm saying, okay, well, now you're out propagating lies. And if you're out propagating lies and recruiting people into, a lie, and you know it's a lie, and you're not presenting it as a lie, you're presenting it as true, and not just, you're saying it's not just useful, but true when you preach it. So you need to not be promoting those lies to other people, or else, I'm going to step in and say something. I'm going to say, I think you're promoting a lie.
Right. They say it's useful, but that doesn't really work. It doesn't add to the truth value of the claim whatsoever.
They say what?
It doesn't add to the truth value of the claim, no matter how something is useful or how something works.
Oh yeah.
And I would argue that
it's just a placebo effect or something at that point.
I would argue that anything that allows you to believe things that are clearly not supported by reason and evidence is not useful. I mean, maybe it allows you to avoid some reality that you find uncomfortable or whatever, but I think that it's more useful to confront that.
I question too whether or not you can even call that belief. I mean, for example, the woman who says, I'm just going to act like my husband's faithful because I don't want to call him on it because he's wealthy and I don't want to lose all that income. I'm not sure I can win a divorce battle in court. Does she really believe he's faithful, or is she just saying it's working for me to play along? You know what I mean? If a person can say to me that that's true, if you're saying you believe it, to me the definition of belief is that you've accepted it as true. So if somebody says to me, I believe it, and I don't care if it's true or not, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't care? You just said it was true. The moment you said you believed it, you said it was true, that you accept it as true. So you need to defend it as true. If you're just claiming it's useful, don't go around saying you believe it. Say, I use it.
Yeah.
I use it. I use this teaching, but, I know I don't think it's true, but I use it. That's not belief.
They will never do that. They won't do that.
Well, you said somebody did.
Well, the thing is, they do. I mean, if you've got, when it comes to science, a lot of them do. They will go to a university, they will pass biology by pretending that they agree with evolution, and then they get off somewhere to Discovery Institute, and suddenly, they're creationists with their PhD or whatever, and now they're touting that as credentials. So, I mean, they can believe, or they can use something,
Right, but I wouldn't call it a belief. Yeah, I mean, it's like,
even if they don't believe it.
It's a model that you're using. Anyway.
Okay.
That's enough of that. So, okay, Justin, do you have anything else?
All right, I would just like to bump my blog, if that's okay.
Oh, go for it.
All right, it's greenatheist.blogspot.com, and my Facebook badge is also on there for whoever wants to add me as a friend or continue conversation. Thanks all for having me.
All right, good enough. Thanks,
you.
Justin.
Okay, have a good one.
Okay, and then we have Bill from Howell, New Jersey. Hi, Bill. How you doing today?
Hey, Tracie. Hey, Jen. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I have two questions for you, and if I could, I'd like to give you just a short 30-second history of my awakening, as I like to call it. I was raised
starting now.
I was raised Roman Catholic, which there was a lot of dogma, not so many fantastic claims, and there was a lot of Catholics in my town, so it was just a completely normal way to grow up. And when I got married, I married a born-again Christian. Attended church, kind of bounced from church to church, and never really wanted to put my kids in the kids' church. I always felt kind of uneasy when they asked to, hey,
good for you, Bill.
let's take the kids this way. I kind of never wanted to do that. We went to one church, and they had crutches on the wall. And when I looked at the crutches on the wall, I said, what are they there for? She said, well, those are the people that the pastor healed. Right then and there, I started thinking, this is crazy. What am I getting myself into? And I had a good friend who was a paraplegic who went to a faith healer and was told that his faith wasn't strong enough. So,
that's great. So blame the person who's paraplegic. Great.
Yeah. So I started reading the Bible, and I said, let me just read it for myself. I've never read it, and when I read it, I really started having doubts. Genesis was really just a bunch of bull crap for me. And researched evolution. Read a lot of Ken Miller, the Kitzmiller Dover trial. Found your show on YouTube and became an instant fan. And really, I liken myself to like a Jehovah's Witness who's gotten the word, and they're all excited about it. I'm excited about, you know, how much bullcrap this is, and I can't believe that people believe this. You know, what else did I want to tell you? I wanted to say that, you know, I'm 39 years old, and I probably didn't have this awakening until I was 37. And it's like embarrassing, you know, that you can be fooled for so long.
Oh, I'm right there with you, though, Bill. Don't be embarrassed.
How old were you?
Well, but by the time I deconverted, I was probably around your age.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But the problem that I run into now is I've already, you know, been married, and I've already raised my kids are 8 and 5 years old. And
Oh, yeah, they're out of the house.
Taught them, you know, I've already taught them that, you know, religion is the right way to go, and Jesus and the Bible is the truth. Now that I know that it's not,
Oh, yeah.
I'm afraid to tell them. I'm actually afraid.
Well, yeah, you've got
I
some...
don't want them to go to school and say that they don't believe in God, because I know, I mean, even here in New Jersey, we're not nowhere near the Bible Belt, but, you know, they're going to be discriminated against. They're going to get a lot of bad reaction from it. So I don't know when to tell them. I don't know what to tell them. You know, when they're 21 and 22, and they're strong enough to defend themselves, and they're secure in who they are, you know, I'll tell them how Daddy believes. But as of right now, I feel sad that I can't tell them how I believe. I can't tell them the truth. I have to perpetuate, you know, the lie that I don't want them to be 37 years old like I was and figure it all out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. And if it helps, we get letters like yours. That's not an uncommon situation for somebody to say, I'm married, and I was a believer when I got married, and my spouse is a believer. And we've even had letters from people who said, I'm engaged.
Yeah.
And we were both, you know, zealous Baptists, and now I've deconverted, and I'm afraid to tell my fiance because I think this is going to ruin it.
Well, I told my wife, and it caused some problems with my wife and I, but we're past it. You know, we love each other.
Well,
Yeah.
but the thing is, you've got these 2 kids now, and you're saying you're having some kind of second thoughts about how the kids are being raised, what they're being taught, and what this is going to mean for them as they get older. And you have some questions about what it would mean if you were to actually tell them what you think.
Yeah.
And then my question would be, where is even though you and your wife have worked out whatever works between you, what is her, like, where is she at? Where's her head at on this?
She doesn't want me to tell them how I believe.
Okay.
I agree with her only for the fact that I don't want them to lose friends. I don't want, you know, I don't know. I feel embarrassed even saying this, but I know what's going to happen. You know, they could go to school and say, you know, my daddy doesn't believe in God, and I don't believe in God. And, you know, their friends are going to look at them different. Their teachers are going to look at them different. I used to look at people different who were atheists. I mean, which brings me to my second question. I'll ask you when I'm done with this, but I used to think that atheists were lost people, and I know they're going to be viewed that way, and I don't want them to suffer that in school.
I understand. Yeah, I understand totally what you're saying. You don't want them to be treated with prejudice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have children?
I do.
Jen does.
How old are they?
My son is 4.5, and he does not have, he doesn't even know anything about religion or God or anything like that. We don't actually think that's a very appropriate topic to bring up to an impressionable child.
Yeah.
So we haven't told him anything about that.
That's kind of where I am. I can't see, even my 8-year-old though, he's starting to ask questions.
Well,
I don't want him to get to be like 15 and 16 and say, well, how come you were lying to me all this time? You didn't tell me how you really believed.
yeah, and the thing is, that doesn't mean that we won't tell him anything about it, because one of the things that I think it's important to do with young children is teach them to think for themselves and give them the tools so that when they're approached by their theist classmates, they're not vulnerable to that. And so essentially, when he's a little older, we'll start inoculating him against these beliefs so that when he gets to school, he might lose a few friends over this. But you know what? Those people probably... My impression of this is that if you lose a friend because you're an atheist, they probably really didn't like you very much anyway, and your atheism is the excuse they use to dump you.
Yeah, I think that's fine if you're an adult, but if you're a 10 or 12-year-old child,
Yeah, I understand
You know what I
you have the child's parents to deal with too.
Yeah, and I understand too, Bill. Believe me, my mother's family is from New Jersey, and it's all Italian Catholic.
yeah.
So I know what you're talking about. This is, boy, I mean, it's such a complicated thing when you have another spouse that feels differently. When there is something, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's something called the Universal Unitarian or Unitarian
Universalist,
Church. And it's sort of like something that a lot of atheists attend, and it's an interfaith church that has even atheist members. So a lot of people that are looking for community and who are sort of in a situation where there's this religious ambiguity like you're describing will attend these UU churches.
Yeah.
And that's why I was kind of asking about your wife and where she's at. I don't know but it would be an easy transition to get the kids into a UU situation where they probably wouldn't notice anything beyond we changed churches.
Yeah.
And then they would be in a situation where, at the very least, they wouldn't be being indoctrinated into a highly specific fundamentalist religion. They would have a real open playing field with lots of different religious beliefs, including no religion, that would be presented. I'm sorry, what?
What was the name of that organization?
They're the Unitarian or Unitarian Universalists.
Yeah.
And they're just big interfaith so that you can keep the society and the structure of like a church situation. And they do the few sermons, I'm going to put sermons in quotes, the few sermons I've heard from UU preachers have actually been more like lectures on religious, like comparative religion. So it's actually kind of educational in that they'll talk about religious histories or religions in different parts of the world. It's actually not a bad place to go if that's the kind of structure that you're looking for and you have a family and you want that kind of social, backbone.
Yeah. Another option, Bill, is ethical culture societies. And you can just do a Google search on ethical culture and you should come up with some stuff. These actually are recognized in most places as a non-theistic religion.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's the same kind of thing. You've got this sense of community. They have secular Sunday school and things like that. So there's some other options out there besides regular religion.
Yeah, I mean, we've stopped going to church. It's one thing that my wife is a little upset about. She really enjoyed going to church and, hearing a passage.
Well, then
This could be a really good compromise.
Yeah, I guess it could be. And so the first one you said was the Unitarian University Society?
Unitarian Universalist.
Universalist.
Yeah, and sometimes they're just called UU.
Okay, Universalist. And the other one was the Ethical Cultural Society.
Yeah, ethical culture.
And these are like local groups that you can go to? And
Yeah, UU churches are found pretty well scattered, so you should be able to find something somewhere nearby.
What would they teach? What would they?
Well, like I was saying, you could go in there and hear like a lecture on religious histories. It might not be a history of Christianity. It might be like a lecture on like something about Hindu or something. I mean, it's just huge. It's this big, embracive church. Somebody's letting us know it's been around for a while.
Yeah, we've actually even had Unitarian presidents. So I can't think of the name. John Adams, that's right.
So yeah, it's definitely, it's more like a lecture format. It's not like a sermon format. You go in and they just sort of teach. They teach about different ideas. Sometimes they teach about like ethics or morality or social, like civic duty and things like that. So they have, it's just a very sort of positive experience, and they're just not real, it's nothing critical. It's like you go in there and everybody's welcome. And if you don't believe, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to find people that would define themselves as Christians, so you'll find people that define themselves as atheists, some that are Buddhists maybe, or, Wiccans or whatever. It's sort of like a BYOG, the
Yeah.
bring your own God kind of thing.
And a lot of theists would probably feel comfortable there that aren't really into a specific doctrine, who just say, well, I believe in God, but I don't really like the whole doctrinal thing. You know? So,
what I've decided to do now is just, when they ask me questions, I'm going to answer them honestly.
That I recommend that.
you have to.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna try to change them or try to push anything down their throat. I think when they're old enough to start asking me questions, they already know that I believe in evolution. You know what I mean? And my wife explains to them, well, Daddy does believe in evolution, and that's God's plan for us to evolve. So we can take God out of the picture. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's just I don't I wish somebody would have. I don't know what really woke me up was seeing those crutches on the wall and saying to my wife, how come you can only heal people with a limp? How come you can't? Why doesn't an amputee go up there and get a new arm?
Because they don't have sufficient faith, apparently.
They don't have sufficient faith. Why can't my friend who's a paraplegic get his spinal cord put back together? And none of that ever happens. And what really did it when I started researching was the Dover trial. When you watch that was what I was waiting for, I guess, my whole life, to see the experts on religion or creation and the experts on evolution have it out.
Yeah.
Put it all on the table. Let's have a court case. And they got blown. The creationists got blown away.
Yeah.
Absolutely blown away. They didn't even, redirect or ask questions about testimony from the evolutionists. They just kind of stated what they wanted to state. And that's what really did it for me. So, and Ken Miller, you guys know who Ken Miller is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Christian.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Which I wrote to him, and he actually wrote me back, and I was surprised to find that out. So I know I've been on a while. I don't want to keep you guys.
That's all right.
It just brings me to my last question. After finding out that he was like the real thing for me, that really kind of pushed me over the edge and made me become awake, as I like to say. And to find out that he was still a Christian, I started questioning. I'm the only one in my family who believes the way I believe. And I'm constantly asked, well, what are you now? You're not a Christian anymore? And, it's breaking my mother's heart.
I'm sure.
I've lost somebody in the family already who won't speak to me. They think I'm evil. They don't necessarily think I'm evil. They think I'm standing in a busy road and I'm about to be hit by a car, and they need to tell me to get out of the way.
And I don't mean, when I smile, I'm not laughing at your situation. I understand that this is serious for you. It's just, to me, it's just kind of ironically funny, sad, however you want to label it. It's hard for me to believe, the impact that religion has on families and society, and I hate to hear it, but it's so ridiculous, even though I understand it's personal for you.
Well, I tell you what, I've never felt so content.
Well, good.
I'm never going to burn in hell. I'm just it's such a good feeling to know the truth, and I know I have it now. But constant questions from, say, especially my mother. Well, what are you now?
Okay.
And I don't know how to answer her. I've looked at the definitions on your guys' website, and I'm still confused. I'll tell you my belief, and you give me a label, okay?
Well, here's a first question that might help, okay? There's a claim, God exists. Do you accept that claim is true?
I don't know.
Okay, then you're an atheist, number one.
See, I thought I was agnostic, even because I'm using the word I don't know. I believe there's a God. I have no proof that there's one. I want to believe that there's one. I don't want to believe that we're worthy.
Okay, but when I asked you, I said there's a claim God exists, right?
Mm.
Do you believe that claim is true? If you believe God exists, then your answer to that question...
I think so.
Okay, then the answer is yes. That means you're a theist.
I'm a theist.
Okay, that just simply means that you believe a God exists.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the difference between a theist and an agnostic?
Well, it's not a difference between them. It's two different things. So you're a theist because you believe a God exists.
Okay.
Now you followed that up with, but I don't know. I don't know. So it's kind of like if I were to say, I believe my husband is faithful, but I don't know. Okay? So I think it's true that he's faithful, but I understand I could be wrong.
Right.
And that's what you're saying. And that would make you an agnostic theist.
I'm an agnostic theist.
But if you're talking to your Catholic mother whom you wish to not have break her heart, you probably just want to say, I'm a theist, I still believe in God. You don't need to explain to her that you're not sure, and you can just tell your mom, I still believe in God, and if that's, for her, the fact that you're not Catholic is probably sufficient to just send her over the edge. But
No,
Yeah.
you know what? She's a little bit open-minded.
okay, good.
She's 70 years old, and she went from, in the last few months of me, we constantly have these debates, which I love. I really, really love to have these debates. Not so much with Mom, because I feel like I'm beating her up. But she thought that evolution meant that you don't believe in God, and evolution that we come from monkeys, and I try to explain to her, and I show her some books on evolution, and she went from completely not believing in it to believing in it. She's a full-fledged believer in evolution now.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And she just thinks, it's God's plan and blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, I told her I was an agnostic, and it really upset her. Don't tell people you're an agnostic.
What will they
you know
think?
What? We started, I met a couple of friends who believe, like-minded, and we go out and we talk. We'll meet at a bar or whatever, and we'll have these conversations. People will bring their books. And we talk in hushed tones because, people start to look over, and you know what I mean? It's just, I never thought that I would be discriminated against. I never knew what it was like to be discriminated against, and I'm kind of starting to get that now.
Wow.
Which is why I don't want to pass that on to the kids right now.
So this is like prejudice against a theist by doctrinal theists.
Wow.
I guess it just, you can't escape it. All right, well, is there anything else, Bill? We got another caller on. It's been
No,
patient.
that's it. But I'm an agnostic theist. I think I just want to get it right. I'm an
Yep.
agnostic theist because I believe a God exists. I just don't believe anybody really knows how or what.
Yeah, there you go. That's pretty much it.
Now you need to work on why you believe a God exists.
Just on faith.
Oh, then that's an admission that you don't have evidence.
I think
Right,
he
no, I don't.
understands that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So-
I don't. I don't believe I have any evidence at all. I mean, I don't believe anybody does. And I love when people call your show and they say they have proof for God.
Oh, yeah.
You guys,
Yeah.
We love it,
take 'em-
too.
We love it too.
Yeah,
In
you
fact,
guys don't chuckle. You're just like, oh, good. I love to hear that.
yeah, we wish the chat room would send us some of the theists that show up there.
Oh, well.
Yeah. All right, well, have a good show, guys.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and we have Joanne from my hometown, Orlando,
All right.
Florida. Hey, Joanne.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Here, you got some cold weather down there.
Yeah, and I actually got a cold because of it.
Oh, no. But you got a question. We're running out of time, so let's get you in. What's your question?
Well, my thing was, it kind of trails off of Bill's. I was raised very strong Orthodox Catholic. My entire family is extremely religious. They're spiritual and then there's religious. They're extremely religious. And I have recently become agnostic, and I have a husband who has always been atheist. And as a result, our 10-year-old daughter, who I currently have in a private Catholic school, because, I went to private Catholic school my whole life, has come to me and she says, Mom, how do we know that this whole God thing isn't similar to the Santa Claus lie?
Okay.
And I'm not sure exactly how to approach it with her. I do have a minor in religious studies, so I have a lot of information in regards to the foundation of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism and stuff. But I'm not sure how to take this conversation with her.
I guess the first question I would put to her is, why are you asking? What is it that's prompted this question?
Well, that and compliment her on her critical thinking skills.
Yeah,
that would be.
that too.
So she's very analytical, like her father, very
Great.
scientific, which is why we don't have her in public school. I had to put her in private school because in public school she was doing horribly, and when they tested her, they kept saying, well, she scores above average IQ. We don't understand it. It was just that she was bored. So we moved her over to, of course, a private school that could cater more to her needs.
Can I ask a question, Joanne? Do you do you have any preferences or feelings about what she believes, or what are your thoughts on do you care what she believes?
It's not so much that I care, but I want her to know the truth.
And which is what?
Huh?
What would you say is the truth?
So the truth is that a lot of the scriptures, the Holy Bible, the things that she's learning in school, were actually written by man. There was no type of, spiritual connection or some divine intervention that caused these people to write these books.
Okay, and you said your husband's an atheist, right?
Yes, he does.
Okay, so I guess what stands in the way of you telling your daughter what you just told me?
The fact that the entire family, like, she's not aware that my husband is an atheist at all.
What does she think he is?
She assumes that he's just like everyone else in the family, that, you know, he's Christian. She assumes that I'm Christian as well.
Are you going to church?
No, we've actually stopped going to church. But yeah, for a regular time, for most of her youth, we were going to church on Sundays and Wednesdays.
Okay.
I was reading the children's Bible to her at night. So, I mean, she's had a lot of that influence already. And, you know, I don't know how to approach it, you know, just kind of, I mean, what do I say? Well, Mommy was mistaking.
Well, sometimes Mommy is mistaken.
Yeah,
I mean, and that's okay to say that.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to approach it. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of parents get wrapped up in this deal where you have to be right all the time or your kid's going to lose respect for you. And I think actually kids know when you're not right and you're just not admitting it. And I think you actually gain more of their respect if you can admit that you made a mistake. So I don't think there's anything wrong with telling her, hey, I was mistaken about this. This is what I think now, and it's based on this new evidence that I got.
And that might actually be a really great way to approach it, to say that, you know, well, there was a time when I thought this, or there, you know, I used to think this way, but then I learned some things that made me rethink this, and I changed my mind about it. And let her know that it is okay to change your mind when you're presented with a good reason to. That actually could be a positive lesson.
Yeah, I think it'd be a really great lesson about how the scientific method works. That, you know, this is you know, self-correcting. When, you know, you have something that you think is true and then you get better evidence, then you have to change what you think. That's the only intellectually honest thing to do. I think that's a great lesson for a kid. And 10 years old, I think that's right on time.
Yes.
I mean, her ability to make moral judgments is really going to kick in the next couple of years. So she's probably going to be thinking a lot about these things.
Right.
So, you know, equipping her with these tools, I think, is a great thing to do right now.
Now, you did say she was in a private Catholic school, correct?
Yes.
So I would let her know that no matter what she, you know, what she personally believes, she needs to kind of toe the line with regard to what they want her to put on tests or what they want her to. I mean, she wants to keep her grades up. I wouldn't want her to get so much into this idea that this is a bunch of crap that she then makes it suffer, because a lot of times, despite the religious doctrinal instruction in these schools, sometimes they are, you know, better learning institutions, which I would think that's probably why you have her in that school.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would remind her that you don't necessarily have to believe it to give the teacher what she wants sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. And you know, I also, you know, have witnessed things like, you know, my mother, for instance, shooting her down.
Okay.
When she came to her, for instance, about the great things she learned about the Big Bang Theory and the universe, and, you know, how everything started as like this, I guess, cosmic pool, and she's explaining it to her, and, you know, Grandma's just like, no, God created it and stuff, and you're wrong and stuff, and I mean...
Well, Joanne, we're rolling credits, so I think I need to let you go.
Okay.
But I appreciate your call, and I hope we were able to help you a little bit.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And just once again, we're going to be at Threadgill's after the show. Feel free to come out and join us if you're an atheist or an atheist-friendly person. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. And I guess we're out.